So today I'm going to be talking about our kind of internal BIM coordination process, and more specifically, digital field layout. So using a robotic total station and the Autodesk point layout add-in for Revit to perform digital layout in the field, as opposed to the more traditional kind of old-fashioned way. And I thought a great place to start would be with some background on kind of that traditional approach that we've previously taken, especially for those who may not be as familiar with the construction side of things. So this is an example of a plumbing dimension plan for laying out MEP sleeves in the field. We were using this approach in our office up until fall of 2020 or so. That's when we really started reaching toward using a more technologically advanced approach. So taking a closer look here, you can see on the left here, we typically would establish control lines that are dimensionally tied back to column grid or some other known building coordinates. And then from that, the trades would come use this dimension plan to locate each sleeve individually, and that would basically mean, intersecting these two dimensions to place each sleeve. Very manual process, obviously a lot of room for error there, but also just a very time-consuming process. So
yeah, very tedious. You get to work and you're like, God, I'm gonna have to do that task today.
exactly, and also just the sheer number of sleeves on any for this is a residential project, so it is very easy to potentially overlook a sleeve or pull the wrong dimension for the wrong sleeve. But the main driver really was the time factor. In order for this process to start, you have to get your concrete form deck up, and almost as soon as that happens, you typically have rebar installation starting as well. The preferred approach is to get all of your sleeves in first, just because rebar can really, take up a lot of space. And if you don't have your sleeves in the right location early on enough, you've got to work around rebar that's already in place. It can just really get away from you. And that time factor is really what drove us to advance into the start using some of the digital layout tools. So a few months later, summer 2021, we had our next major podium project, and our concrete contractor actually approached us and recommended that we try using some of the point layout tools. They used a robotic total station for all their formwork layout, and really recommended using it for sleeves and embeds and other concrete related or adjacent components. Between the speed that concrete contractor works at, and also the fact that this was a post-tension podium project, so lots of very critical structural components embedded in the slab beyond just your standard steel reinforcement, really required that we were able to lay out sleeves accurately and quickly enough as to not slow them down. So we partnered with them and started working on really adding this layout process to our coordination efforts. Typically for coordination, we work closely with our mechanical, electrical, plumbing contractors to get their sleeve locations identified, whether it's just a kind of typical unit plan for repeated unit layouts, or more specific needs for risers up through the building, things like that. It's a very involved process. We usually would sit down with them and kind of go through one by one, and designate dimensions for each fixture type or each unit type to really get those sleeves located as accurately as possible. From there, we would generate a point file. As you can see, some of these points centered on sleeves and embeds. And then we sent that to our concrete contractor, who actually handled the layout process for us as part of their formwork layout. It was a pretty effective process. There were a few, lessons learned along the way. And I'll get more into detail on the actual workflow of doing that point layout later on in the presentation. But one of the main comments that we got, not only from the concrete trade, who greatly appreciated being able to maintain their schedule, we also got comments from our MEP trades that they never wanted to do it the old way again, just because it was so manual and took so much time. Plus, the constant feeling of rebar, right on your back. So, but another, aspect that we identified really in this first project was the cost of subcontracting this layout. Just the, actual robotic total station layout portion to our concrete trade was roughly the same cost as an entry-level robotic total station. So we kind of started considering bringing some of those capabilities in-house. Around the same time, and this is a reused picture, but you get the idea. We also started using the same point layout process, again, integrated into our MEP coordination process. And then rather than working with the concrete trade, we actually sent the final point file layout to a third-party surveyor who performed all the layout for us. Again, similar costs to investing in a robotic total station. So on our next major project at the end of 2021, we finally bit the bullet, so to speak, and bought our own robotic total station, Hilti PLT 300. One of the main reasons we selected it was actually recommended by a few of our trade partners for its user friendliness and just ease of layout. And just kind of an overview, here's a time lapse of one of our superintendents performing layout, but you essentially set up your robotic total station, site it into known control points on site, and then the total station will follow around the prism on the top of this rod, and it essentially guides you from point to point. And each time you lay out a point, it directs you to the next closest one, which really ensures that you never miss a sleeve, and obviously really speeds up that process and allows you to get all this layout completed well ahead of any mild steel reinforcement, or especially any post-tension tendons or other structural elements going in. Another advantage.
While you're at it, it seems like Brian, thank you so much for your question. What software are you using for your point creation?
So I'll go over that in a little bit, but
Perfect.
We've primarily been using the Autodesk point layout add-in for Revit, and we've had a lot of success with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. One other thing I wanted to add, one of the advantages to this Hilti system that we have used some, you can actually load a CAD file directly into it, completely independent of that point layout add-in for Revit, and work straight from the CAD file to generate layout points. And, it's more or less all self-contained right there on site. So on this same project, we not only, made some improvements and got a little more sophisticated in our workflows, but we also started seeing some of our subcontractors get a little more sophisticated as well, working from marked up PDFs rather than the, hands-on sitting down with them that we were doing, just a year before. In addition to that, we've also kind of started receiving CAD files and some other just easier to use processes. So you can see here, we got a marked up PDF locating just a handful of common area sleeves. And then we worked to get those placed within the Revit model, and then worked through our coordination process, weekly meetings with the trades, just to review and confirm those locations. And here's an example of just a typical unit plan that we received that allowed us to actually create model groups for repeating units. There's occasionally you might need to, create a one-off for different unit layout. And here are just some more examples of the actual equipment involved. So this is the total station set up on a, kind of remote location where you're able to sight into your known points. And then here's your prism and rod used to locate and then mark and lay out your sleeve locations. Another example of just how important it is to get these sleeves in there and located correctly, and just the amount of, other elements in that slab that, once it's all placed, you don't really see. Here's just an overview of our workflow. Quite a few steps involved, but the highlights are, we work from information provided by our trades. We work through our coordination process with them to, finalize those locations. We send the finalized layout to those trades for final review, as well as to the design team for any comments. Any final comments we get are then corrected. From there, we generate the point layout and either send it to the responsible party or our field team for internal layout. And then those trades follow almost immediately behind, setting those sleeves as soon as possible. And then we also will, I'll touch on this in a minute, but we follow up with a drone photo, just straight down view of the slab that we then overlay with our layout to make sure that everything lines up as best as possible. From here, I'm gonna switch over to Revit just briefly. So this is an example of just one of our concrete pour areas. We've done most of our coordination already. As far as let me see if I can. Okay, so this is the Autodesk point layout add-in. Kind of the easiest process here is you can do an instance and choose a sleeve point. It actually automatically picks the next sequential number for you. And then you can select a type so that it puts the description of exactly what that sleeve is automatically. Select all your different sleeve types, or you can select them individually just depending on how you want to number them. And then it generates a series of points. You can create a schedule from it. This is one I had set up in advance. And I will jump back over to my presentation. So this is just a couple examples of that drone overlay that we do to really do some quality control, confirm our sleeve locations after the fact,
so cool.
Prior to the pour. This is a great example that one of my coworkers in the Raleigh office put together that really shows, how much information you can build into this review process. All of this is in a self-contained PDF that can be sent around for review. But it between the point layout and then being able to follow up and do some quality control with this really makes the process easy. Just a couple of additional examples of that.
Are those a compilation of photos that are put together from the drone, or is it like one giant photo? Do you know?
So we kind of have taken both approaches. Some are an orthomosaic where it's a composite of multiple images, but sometimes you'll get a little bit of skew with that. So it's better if you can do just one complete overall image.
Interesting. Okay, awesome.
Here's just a quick shot of what those sleeves look like once the form deck has been stripped and once install is started. And then just another example of, these are in kind of reverse order, but where we had some sleeves missing that were identified by the overlay and then able to be placed prior to concrete pours. There are a couple other additional layout uses that I was going to go over, but looks like I'm a little short on time.
Let's see here. No, I think you have a few more minutes there.
Okay. One other use case for this that we're not using in my office, but again, wanted to highlight our main office in Raleigh, actually has a full-time surveyor in-house who I'm not sure that they're doing much advanced layout for the sleeve layouts. I think most of their trades handle it themselves. So he will actually come around with more or less the same process and back check any, structural embed locations, sleeve locations. And then from that, he's able to generate a deviation report, show where we have certain embeds or sleeves in or out of tolerance. And overall, I mean, we've really just had great success with this whole process. And I would say it's well worth the investment, at least for us.
Well, it seems like many people agree. It seems like we're getting quite a few comments in terms of people having used this software and never going back, as you're mentioning. And so for those of you who are on the fence, I would say that this is definitely the way to go, right? Make no hesitation. Everybody who is using it is absolutely loving it and wouldn't have it any other way, right? It seems like
Absolutely.
the way to go. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach. That was a fantastic presentation.